always be honest, always be forthright. Sometimes honest and forthright means you just keep your mouth shut because that's what's needed. But don't ever let yourself think of my short-term success can supersede complete honesty with anyone.
Need a partner who sees the big picture? Forza Management. We're not just property managers, we're strategic partners. Navigating the complex world of commercial real estate can be daunting. That's where Forza Management comes in. Forza Management provides services in the mountain and desert states and covers all types of asset classes, including retail, industrial, and office. Our team of experts delivers exceptional property management services, namely property maintenance, lease administration, and annual CAM reconciliations. When looking at your next property, check out our website at forzacommercial.com. Forza Management, maximizing your investment and minimizing your stress.
I want to introduce Russ Smith, who had a storied career with Wendy's and has now been retired for a few years. And we appreciate you coming on the Dirt Dog Pod today.
I'm glad to be here. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
You know, you're a really fun guest for me to have on here because you individually have taught me. First off, you've known me for almost my entire life, really, right?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely since you were a high school kid.
And I've always kind of looked at, I've never told you were one of my mentors and one of the people that have taught me how to do things, but you have. And so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your knowledge today.
My pleasure. And, I would never have thought of myself as a mentor of you either. In fact, you've taught me a lot. But you make me think about, when I was contemplating coming on your program, I started thinking, without really trying to think of it this way, but I started thinking about all of the people in my career that I would say, yeah, that was definitely a mentor. I learned a lot from that person. And, here's the thing that I picked up. And even if it was a little thing, and I think maybe that's one of the more rewarding and interesting things is that you're in a community of people that like to share. And, you get a group of real estate people in the same room, or at a bar or whatever. And pretty soon you're all sharing these awesome war stories about the business and having a lot of fun with that. And it's really kind of an interesting business in that as hard as it is, there's an amazing amount of sharing and an amazing amount of friendship building. Like guys like Crosby and and Todd and Kath and Clark, people that I've known for so long and just, they're dear friends in addition to being great colleagues. So that's one of the best things about the career. It really, we talked about this whole long career with Wendy's, which is not super common for people to stay with one retail brand for as long as I did, which was 26 years. So I think it probably merits some discussion on that. I think it's interesting to talk about. So when I went to work for Wendy's, of course, there was a reputation that it was a quality company. You have Dave Thomas as the founder who, guiding principles include things like do the right thing, give back, of course, we've changed the lingo to be a little nicer sounding. We say profit means growth. Dave's original words were profit is not a dirty word. So with all of the nice stuff, you still got to make a profit too. And I knew some of that stuff, but I only started really understanding that as I got into the company and started seeing how people were treated. And, especially people that they needed to be, called to order or in some cases asked to leave. It was always done with respect. And, there's never, there was I remember over time, some voices being raised here or there, but almost never from the higher up echelon of the company. Very, kind, good people. And that carried through. And, the whole attitude of everyone tends to be, we got a lot of really hard work to do. We're going to do it with respect for each other.
So a lot to dive in on there.
Yeah.
Let's start with the camaraderie piece of things. What's interesting is of all the various retail aspects, the burger business is competitive.
Yep.
Super competitive. And so it's an interesting thing to hear you say that about the kind of sharing and some of that, because I think that extends. You referenced some team members, you referenced some brokers that you had worked with for some time. But what also has been true, at least that I found with you, is you've also been pretty friendly with the competitors.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's been true. And I think that you do see that there's a bit of a, I don't know if it's camaraderie or some kind of a connection. And most of us do have many friends in the competitors' side. And frequently over a course of a career, not so much in my case, but people are moving from one to the other. Mm-hmm. Many of the good friends I have at Wendy's had previously worked at McDonald's. And one of my really good friends from my early days at Wendy's, she is working for McDonald's now, because it just kind of goes that way. And it's not just Wendy's and McDonald's. It's like a former boss of mine, a good buddy, Piacentini. He's now CDO at Chipotle. And so, we'll have occasional conversations and stuff like that. It's the kind of thing that maintaining those friendships and sharing what you can, which is without violating proprietary rules, but sharing what you can share is very helpful to both. And, you can help somebody without breaking or even edging towards breaking the rules. It's just good to have friends that will help you and that you can help them in various things. That's always been a big plus. So, yeah, that is one thing. The other thing, too, that's been a big benefit to me, because I haven't worked in other companies, I don't have those perspectives. And so in my case, having friends in some of these other companies really has been good, because I can ask questions that I otherwise wouldn't have any idea about, how different companies do different things. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's been especially valuable to have, friends across the board. Be it Chick-fil-A, Sonic, McDonald's, it's kind of running through my head of thinking of a few people that I've been friends with. So
have you found the camaraderie there, that we're talking about, has that changed over time, from when you originally entered in the commercial real estate business to now, or has it been kind of consistent from your standpoint?
That's a really good question. And actually, I think that, I don't know about if, speaking of the industry as a whole, but what I can say is this: the more confident that I became, and it's been a lot of years, so yeah, I've grown in confidence. I've got a funny story about that in a second, but my anxiety about getting the deal or being the winner or whatever the case may be, or making sure I beat that guy out, whatever, that's gone down. And with that going down, the thing that's gone up is my confidence and my ability to be relaxed about talking about things with people that would be my competitors. And the feeling of having to beat them, I want to beat McDonald's. There's no question about the competition element, but the edge to it has gone off quite a bit the more experience I got. And I think that mainly comes from the confidence that, you do it this long, and if you work hard at it, you'll be good. You get good at it. It's sort of like, getting an education is very important. Not knocking that. I did that myself, but, it kind of reminds me of that old story of, the Native American dad, teaching his son. It's like to learn how to be an effective hunter, an effective, Native American. Here's all the stuff we've got to learn how to do. And the way you're going to learn how to do it is by following your uncles and your dad and your mom and your aunts, and you're going to be figuring it all out by following their example. I think real estate is a lot like that. The being around, your associates, that's really how you get in on knowing stuff and getting smart about it. The funny story was this. Years ago, we were sitting in a meeting and we were just introducing one of our cool programs at Wendy's, which was a program where we do all of the real estate for a franchisee. We go get them the site. We take care of it all. We even sign the lease and build it for them, and then just turnkey. And I know a lot of companies just do that anyway, but Wendy's did not. It was kind of a new program for us. And I remember our CDO was up and giving a speech, and it was filled with 100 or so franchisees and a bunch of other real estate people. And she made the statement, well, how many of you consider yourselves real estate experts? I mean, come on, by show of hand. And she was going to make a point, right? It's like, well, none of you do. I was the only guy in the room that raised my hand. And that was with other real estate guys in the room.
Right.
And it's like, well, I am an expert.
Yeah. I mean, it is what I do for a living.
I
right?
am.
Yeah.
And so, I'm not so sure that when I first got started in the business, I would have had the confidence. I would have just sat there like everybody else. But it's like, heck yes, I'm an expert. And so that it comes with, paying attention and following the lead of others, learning from others, mostly. So learning from your experience is good and bad, because not all experiences are good. That's for sure. You got to keep plugging. You got to keep at it, because, a bad experience doesn't mean that's the way it's always going to be.
26 years with Wendy's would have put you starting in the mid-90s?
Late 90s, yeah.
Late 90s, okay. And then what did you do prior to that?
So I worked for a number of years for the Mrs. Fields Cookies, which was mostly mall and street deals, mostly mall. And then before that, I had a run with a developer. Some of the old guys might remember the Crow Brothers development out of Kansas City. And I worked for First Security Bank for a short period of time, which I didn't particularly love doing, but that short time at the bank taught me so much about how deals can get done, and that intricacy of funding and the difficulty that is. It was very worthwhile. Like I said, I didn't stay there too long, but it was really educational for me. And then, believe it or not, right out of business school, my first job was a raw, good old dirt dog, just doing deals. I couldn't find what I wanted to do in the real estate business. I got the idea I wanted to do real estate in a real estate class taught by Ken Woolley. A lot of people know Ken, including you.
Oh, yeah. And
I remember sitting in that class and just thinking, I want to do something that I want to build that building that is, such an architectural delight there in Houston. I want to do, and the ideas started coming, flowing. I didn't even know what to say. It was like, well, how do I become a real estate person? And so anyway, long story short, first job was just real estate broker for Grubb & Ellis when they were new in Utah, and got into doing investment real estate deals. That's how I got my start. So
great background, and I love the dirt dog start.
It was fantastic, yeah. And I hope that that's helped brokers I've worked with, only in the sense that I have a real aversion to letting them get the shaft in any way.
Yeah.
I never have wanted to see a guy or anybody get shortchanged, and that might be in part because I was there.
Yeah, I was going to say, at least when I used to broker with you, from my experience, you always went above and beyond, which is, it isn't always the case, right? And so I think that's good perspective to have, right? It's a good way to start.
Yeah, I think it was.
What was that Ken Woolley class had to be amazing.
It was super cool.
Yeah.
I don't know who, maybe everyone doesn't know Ken, but he's done so many cool things. When he was an adjunct professor of some kind at BYU and graduate school program, and I remember he was talking about doing affordable housing in Magna, Utah, and we were talking about that, and it was like this whole conversation about affordable housing. Why, you're not building the luxury homes where you can make incrementally more money. It's like, no, I'm building affordable housings and I'm selling them like crazy. They're just turning over. And his philosophy on that was how that not only was that doing a good thing for the community, but he was turning them over so fast. He said, I'm making plenty of money. And I think Taggart was involved with him at that time too, who's a Wendy's franchisee with Ken. And anyway, I don't know. We had I think the thing that was most memorable about that class was he had a friend of his come in who had done a lot of industrial development in Houston. But he didn't talk a lot about the industrial development. He talked about development generally in the city of Houston, which is one of the coolest cities architecturally in the country. A lot of people don't know that, but when you actually dig into it and study it, some of the coolest buildings. And so I was just captivated. It's like, gosh, maybe I should have been an architect. Well, no, more like you should be in real estate was what it ended up. By the end of that term, it was all about, I got to figure out a way to be real estate.
So you've bounced around to a couple different concepts. And then your late 90s. So at that point, it was Phil Holland, right? That was the Utah franchisee?
Phil Arlt.
Phil Alt.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So he was the Utah Wendy's franchisee.
Yeah.
And then somewhere in there, corporate said, we need to establish this outpost in Utah and we need to hire a real estate person here.
Exactly what happened.
Okay.
Phil was bought out in 96. Late 96, I came on in early 97, I think.
And he had some monster volume sales stores.
Volumes.
Like the Sugar House unit, the downtown Salt Lake City unit, right?
Monster volumes, just astronomical, very successful. I never knew Phil. I did go to his funeral, just, the company support for Phil and whatnot. But his daughter worked for me for a number of years when we maintained a company presence in Salt Lake and had the office in Salt Lake. And she was great. And so by extension, I'm sure Phil was an awesome guy and did a fantastic job with Wendy's. And some of those Wendy's, and the one closest to the office here was put in by Phil and was a massive volume from the beginning, in Sugar House and Fifth South or Fourth South and Fifth East. And some of these others that are still there and still cranking out really good volumes. What we saw with Wendy's, or what the company saw, was, here we have a population that could easily support at least twice as many Wendy's restaurants. Mm-hmm. And so they looked at that, saw an opportunity, decided they'd try to buy Phil, and they did. And then that's where I got my start with Wendy's, was that goal of doubling the size of the market.
And then when you looked at the country back then, so obviously headquarters in Columbus, mm-hmm. Was there a regional office maybe in Denver or Phoenix or somewhere?
What we had was a divisional office in Denver and or Phoenix. I don't remember when I came on. I think the headquarters at that time was in Denver for a division, and then we had a regional headquarters in Phoenix, I think was what it was. And that was when Wendy's was divided up into 3 or 4 super regions. It's been a lot of evolution since then, but we had a senior vice president, and this is an interesting segue into how we did some site selection stuff. We had a senior vice president and then divisional presidents, and the divisional president out of Denver and the senior was out of Phoenix. And those two individuals were always part of every site ride that we did. And then, of course, my boss, which we called the development director, which I became later, and then the local operators.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was a clown car full of really smart people crammed into a Suburban to go see these sites that, we'd been working our guts out on for months. And you know how that is. It's like you work your fingers to the bone, and then in 15 seconds it can be shot down the drain.
Yeah.
So that can be a real challenge. I know the one thing I learned most about that, and this is a credit to the senior vice president that was over us at the time. People considered him to be a pretty tough guy. For some reason, I really got in good with him, and I think it was because on a site where there was a train track, it was down there in on New Bingham Highway, west of 90th,
Mm-hmm.
or west of Bangalore on 90th or so, and my boss said, you should know everything you can about this. Like, how often does a train come by? Because that could impair traffic. And I found out it was a once-a-day train, comes from someplace out in west, heads into Murray, comes back at night, late at night. And it was like not a big deal, but I knew that.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, we're driving. Senior vice president says, real casual like, so what's the train schedule for this track? Boom, had it for him right there on the spot. And it's like, I think that won him over because that was a pretty esoteric piece of data.
That's pretty good.
But
yeah,
but it's that thing of being super prepared. And then, obviously you're always going to be trying for the best possible sites you can, which is a whole different topic because, Wendy's is not Chipotle. Wendy's isn't Chick-fil-A. So we had some, we're paying the same rents, but not doing the same volumes. And it's one of the biggest things we've got to do at Wendy's is increase volumes, keep pushing volumes, because the real estate market is going to reward who's going to pay, right?
So you start as the remote outpost. You've got a region and a division office that's pretty close, right?
Yep.
In terms of what the West is.
Yep.
When did you start to notice that culture, that you just referred to, and where do you think that came from?
That I started noticing that in the first 6 months, that I observed how people interacted with each other. A very good friend of mine, Jim Bistany, was at that time a simple multi-unit operator. He was I don't remember what we called him, but basically it's a district manager, a 6 or 7 unit manager. And I remember hearing, my office was across from his, and I remember listening to him have conversations with his GMs. And, and sometimes he would kind of get after him, it was pretty blunt, but he was blunt in an honest way, not in a condemning way, not in a punishing way. And then he would always circle back by the end of that conversation with some kind of empowering suggestion that they would hang up feeling like, I'm going to go get this. This is great. When they started the conversation with, there's some problems here. We got to fix them. And, a lot of managers, they would have called the guy up and read him the riot act and said, you got to quit screwing up this or that, or you're going to be gone. I mean, there's so many ways people can handle that. And Jim wasn't the only one. As I watched these guys operate, that's how they acted. And I love the fact that it wasn't just, the leveling, telling the people the truth and giving them the facts, not letting them, think that everything was great when it wasn't, but it was how they would finish somehow with something really encouraging and send people away inspired instead of beaten down. So that I noticed in the very early going with Wendy's, and I saw it over and over and over again. It wasn't always perfect, and not everybody that I interacted had it down, but most of the people that lasted more than 2 or 3 years had it down.
Yeah. What was it like working with Dave?
I didn't know Dave. I met him. It was really interesting. I was on a, big, I think it was a entire North America international call when my great boss, Abigail, was in charge and had us all in one place. And I think it was my 25th or 20th anniversary. And when it's that far along, they usually will say, say a few words, Russ, and tell us a story about Dave or whatever. And only story I could really tell about Dave, I think it's fascinating, is, that humble, down-to-earth kind of goofy guy on TV, that was really Dave. The only difference between the guy on TV and the real Dave was the real Dave's grammar was worse.
Really?
Yeah, he just was a real down-home Midwest kid. Nothing flashy or fancy, just, straight up good guy. And I really think that's where it started, was Dave. He just, those values that he cared about just stayed with the company. People continued to care about those values.
You're in with this infectious culture environment, and corporate just bought the Utah stores back and is running those corporately. And you get to work, and are you doing corporate growth primarily, or are you doing franchise growth?
Yep. So I started out corporate growth only, and my entire territory was Wasatch Front, and just doing corporate deals. And then
so just inside the state
of Utah. Inside the state. And then as that happened, I became acquainted with franchisees that were either based here or had restaurants near here. Like Walker Oil, which is started out with all those small town Wendy's combined with a gas station throughout the state of Utah, and got to know all those kinds of, franchisees out of Idaho and guys like that, Jim Taggart and others that, were nearby, Wyoming, Kenny Drake and guys like that. And then that went well. And I kind of was to the stage after a few years where I was thinking, okay, well, I've done the proverbial work to myself out of a job. So I wonder what's going to happen next. I need to start thinking about things. And at about that same time, things had gone well. And so I was fortunate to be given other markets for company growth and much more expanded franchise opportunities. And we just continued to go like mad as fast as we could, build as many as we could. And there were some really great years before 2008, 09, when we went from, I was talking to one of, I think at one point we had 35 or more real estate directors in the country, and we were cranking out somewhere in the neighborhood of 240 to 280 new restaurants a year.
Boy, that's a ton of growth.
It's a ton. And then we hit the recession. We went to, I think, 6 total people in real estate, 6 or 8. I can't remember, coast to coast.
Yes. That's lease administration. That's everything.
Yeah, that was everybody.
All in.
And my boss and I were the only 2 real estate people in the West at all. And we, mostly were helping franchisees do stuff that they still had in the works. And I think we maybe got a company deal done or 2 or 3, maybe in Dallas. But anyway, and then we started gradually rebuilding. And ever since that time, it's been a much leaner organization and much more franchise focused. Because with Emil Brolick, we brought in the concept of, we need to rebrand. We're old and tired looking. We got to be able to find a way to get that done. Mm-hmm. And the only way to really do that logically was to get franchisees to do it, which worked out great. And that was another great phase. I mean, this kind of turned into talking too much about me. I'm sorry, but it's been so fun. That was another great phase because I got to know some really amazing, cool people that became new franchisees. Yeah, the old guys, I liked them a lot too, of course, but it was super fun to see some of these big players come in that really understood the restaurant business and coming into Wendy's and buying, large numbers of Wendy's restaurants and seeing some of the challenges that come with that. So
cruising through a room full of franchisees is still one of the most entertaining things that I think that I do in my career. And it's so hard to explain it to people outside the industry, but it's literally a room full of Napoleons. And everybody is captain of their own ship there in that crew. And it's so fascinating because, you just think about each individual store has 30 to 40 employees, right?
Yeah, about 15 to 40. Hopefully closer to 40. You're right.
For sure. And you start thinking about that and you add up the numbers and once you hit 10 units, I mean, that's like 250 to 400 humans that you're responsible for. Plus, each in the West here, each one of them has 2.4 people per household. I mean, you all of a sudden are responsible for the livelihood of 1,000 people. Yeah. And it is kind of entertaining, some of the emotions that invokes, in some of those folks.
It's an amazing type of person. I came to respect the community a tremendous amount, and several of the individuals involved even more. Just such solid, good people, and you can tell that they care about those thousands of people that they're responsible for, and they care about the quality of the workplace. They care about everything going on, making sure that their people are cared for. And that's something to be said. I think that the culture helps with that too, that the Wendy's culture generally attracted high moral people to come in.
One of the things that's interesting, you kind of breezed over there, is the real estate department shrinks down to 9 people. 9?
I think it's like about that now, something like that.
About that now.
Yeah.
And so now, one of the interesting things to always watch too is corporate will come up with a great idea. And maybe that's, hey, look, we're going to do spicy nuggets for X, or a son of a Baconator is going to cost Y, right? And then basically they're trying to implement that, and there's really talented operational people that are doing that. But at the end of the day, you really are hearing, in the role that you played for so long, you are kind of the sounding board for the franchisee, right? So you're more or less the interface, right? Almost in between corporate and them.
A lot of that, yeah. And that was, that was actually another interesting experience I had, again, with my boss, Abigail. We were talking about operations, and we all know that you can have a pretty significant impact on volume by who you have running the restaurant, right? I mean, it's a known fact. And I said something offhand like, well, I don't know that much about operations. And she put up her finger and she said, Russ, yes, you do. You've been in Wendy's restaurants for the last 2 decades. You know a lot about Wendy's operations. And that's a good thing to remember when you're out there working. Is like, yeah, you know a lot about what's going on, and you can be a sounding board. Yeah, final decisions about what marketing decides to do or how they implement this, that, or the other policy. Those final decisions may not be the real estate people, but we do have impact. And people in the real estate business should always remember that they have impact. And it kind of goes to one of the I was thinking about early mentors, and Bob Moore told me one day when I was just raw rookie, probably my first month, he said, Russ, people want to hear you call them. People want you to call them. And it's like, you're right, they do. And that goes for marketing and operations and everything like that too, done in the right way. They want to hear your opinion.
Yeah, it's such a fun part of our business, the face-to-face nature.
Yeah, it is. It's what makes it's the most rewarding part about it. And, there'll be people that say to you, hey, your associates aren't your friends. Don't talk to me about my boat. Let's focus on the business deal. You're missing out on a big part of life if you don't, live with the people you're working with, and incorporate it into your life, because it makes it a lot more rewarding, a lot more fun. You definitely want to have fun.
Well, especially if you're going to stick at it for 26 years with one brand.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Why Wendy's?
I think for me, and this whole thing of why did I stay, I probably alluded to it as I went along. One was I had really great people to work with, my equals and my bosses, and later in a management role, the people that worked for me. It was always a positive experience. It was always uplifting, and it doesn't mean that every day was like, hip hip hooray, everything's so fun. I mean, there are obviously some rough times, and frankly, there were a dozen times throughout that 26 years where I did kind of keep my eye open for something else. But I always kept coming back, and the big reason why I always stuck with Wendy's was because of the internal culture. The people that I was with, I just, I'd get to the point where, I don't really agree with somebody on this, but you know what? Let me give it a little time, see if I can figure it out, talk to them about it again, and kind of work through it and see how it goes. And usually with that attitude, anything that was not so great, I figured out a way to work through and be happy about. And so I think it was just really the culture. And then, the opportunity for change. There was always enough change going on. It was like, if you don't like what's happening now, just wait. That was always true at Wendy's. I mean, there was enough change going on that other than that internal culture, it felt like you're in a different company from, different years to, based partly on leadership and stuff like that. But that was a good thing. It was like, oh, great, let's see what's around the next corner. So those are probably the main things. And I think in the latter years, it became especially rewarding because I had such a great group of friends that just were my friends. I wouldn't have wanted to leave them just on that basis. Yeah. So
you got the burger space is crowded, right?
Yeah.
And especially when you compare it to some of the others, right?
Yeah.
Take like Chinese food, for example, where you have Panda and just maybe a couple of competitors.
Yep.
You got 30, 40, 50 retailers out there all doing round hamburgers. And then you have Wendy's doing square hamburgers. Any idea why they stuck with square hamburgers all these years?
Well, I think you probably just described it. Dave, it was Dave's idea. Don't cut corners, it's like, okay. I think it just got to I think that you kind of nailed it. It's like, it's different. Let's keep it different. But, the thing that I don't think Wendy's has often emphasized enough is the fresh, never frozen. You got to go to the gourmet guys now to have that. I mean, the big players, they can't do that. And frankly, it's hard. It's harder on operators to deal with a fresh product. Mm-hmm. But it's worth it. In my mind, it's certainly worth it because there's a difference.
It's interesting. I got celiac. I don't know if you know this.
No, I didn't.
I got celiac 8 years ago, and a lucky amount of type 1 diabetics like myself, like 1/3 of us get both. I am the lucky winner. I got both. Type 1 diabetes and celiac. I got celiac 8 years ago, and when I removed the bun from my fast food options and just food options in general, what was interesting is how quickly you can taste the quality of the beef that you're eating on a hamburger.
Yeah.
Whereas with the bun, it's very difficult to taste if you have a really good quality piece of beef or not. Mm-hmm. And it is a remarkable difference when you go no bun.
It is a big difference. And I think, the other guys do some things really well, better than Wendy's, but they don't win on hamburger. Yeah. That's a big difference. So.
Do you know how many stores that you open in your 26 years with Wendy's? Do you have any idea on the accounting on that?
A few years ago, I added them up because I was feeling disgruntled and thought I might look for another job. And I was thinking, somebody's going to ask me that. I think that I did probably by my own hands around 100, and then touched hundreds over time. especially in the last years at Wendy's, where I was seeing everything we were doing in the West, then it would have gotten into the hundreds. And I think that's where the experience factor really started. And, I talked to other people too who have that kind of level of experience. And you really do get, you do all the scientific things. You can't skip it. You can't just say my gut is going to be right.
This is as you're dialing in on a new site.
Yeah, but my gut is usually right.
Yeah.
It's like once you do it for long enough, you know what the right sites are. And if a site has a couple of demerits, you can figure out if they're going to be demerits that would hurt the store long term, or are they something that can be overcome, and how. And it gets to, once you zero in on with all of your science, and there's some pretty amazing science that we've been able to evolve over the last 25 years, you still are going to be able to, there's an art to it that real estate professionals still need to hone and shape, because it's still really important. Can't skip it.
So you've got the sales forecasting system going, the science that you're referring to, right? You got that going. When you wheel up on a site, though, and it's a new trade area and you don't totally know it, what is it that you're doing in your head or physically? What is it that you're doing to determine what makes something better than the next?
Great question. And I think that, one of the things that I could say is most people can identify, the difference between a plus hard corner and a 3 off corner with tricky access, as one being good and one being not so good. But obviously you want to go into it a lot further than that. And one of the things we always did was we just liked to drive the neighborhood of who our customers are. And so that may take, depending on the site, that may take a long time. You want to see every neighborhood that's going to be drawn to your new restaurant or your new site. See what these people are doing. And, make sure you know where they're going grocery shopping and getting their daily needs. Make sure you understand where the Costco is and if that's going to help you or hurt you. And just all of this patterns, which, again, with mobility data that you can buy now, you can get to where you can see some of that scientifically. Mm-hmm. But unless you drive it, I don't think that you can really feel it. And so it's more than just testing out all of the ins and outs of a site with access and visibility and all of the obvious things. It's also really understanding the neighborhood and your customer that you're going to be drawing on, and how it plays with the competitors and with competing with yourself, because that can make a big difference. Because sometimes, you think in terms of a distance or a population base, when in fact it's really more about what street it is. Kinds of details like that you want to be able to drive and really understand it. That's why banging out a trade area continues to be valuable, even with all the cool stuff we can do now.
One of the exercises that you and I did, which I thought was really fascinating, and it helped me in my career a lot to understand site selection in one store versus the next and how it might comp against its peers, is our friends Jim and Ken bought the Boise market. And you and I spent, I think it was 4 days in a minivan. Yeah. Does that sound right?
It was 3 or 4.
I remember I was the youngest guy, so I volunteered to take the back. That seemed appropriate, right? Because we had 5 of us. And what was fascinating to me is I remember we were kind of lining up for this tour. And the idea there is that there were a lot of older model units. And so they were trying to decide which ones to activate to the new model, right? Image activation.
That's what we're doing.
That was the program, which was a pretty healthy spend, right? To get, the franchisees had to invest quite a bit of money. Yeah. And so where we were trying to say is which ones are the smartest places to spend the money first.
Yeah.
What I can't believe to this day is that you and I went into every single, not just Wendy's bathroom, but we went into every Burger King bathroom, every Jack in the Box bathroom, every Sonic bathroom, every McDonald's We went into every single bathroom of every burger competitor in Boise over 4 days.
Yeah, we did.
And then gave it a grade checkpoint with multiple grades, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just a wild experience. And I think just one of the fun facts that lives rent-free in our heads that maybe other people don't know this about us is we know where the cleanest bathrooms in Boise are located.
Yeah, I can say that about pretty good chunks of Denver, pretty good chunks of Vegas, Salt Lake, Dallas, Phoenix, because we were doing that all across Seattle. We were doing it it was more fun to do as a group.
Oh, for
like
sure.
we did.
Yes, because you get back in the car and you compare notes, right?
You can make a game out of it, and it's fun. So yeah, we probably that's actually a really good point to bring up, because you should always be doing that. You got to have a really good feel for what you're going up against, not just from the standpoint of where you should put your remodel, but should you put a new unit? You really need to know what's happening with your competitor.
I have shared that story with so many people that are new to the business, young to the business, people that are trying to learn, grow, et cetera. And it's, hey, look, I'm marketing this space, or I represent this tenant, or I have this building and I'm thinking about re-tenanting it. And it's great. What does the competitive landscape look like? There's a really easy answer here. You get in your car and you go drive there and you go look at every one of your competitors.
Yeah. That's about it. There's no one's providing that for you that I know of. I mean, you can look at volumes, I guess, but volumes are tricky.
In that career span you've had over 35 years, you've seen a ton of advancement technologically speaking, and you spent a ton of that time in the fast food business. I don't know if anything's ever going to replace that part of it, right? You still got to touch and feel, right?
I don't think it will. And I'll tell you one of the reasons why I actually can go back to, in the early days of working at the cookie company, Randy Fields was a software development genius. That's where his genius was. And the whole concept of POS and getting data directly from restaurants, stores into corporate office, and, being able to parse through data quickly, all of that, we're looking at stuff like that. And one of the things we launched into was some of the earlier multiple regression analyses that I was touched upon. And we were looking at all kinds of data points, and then they took all those data points and compared them to successful, unsuccessful, mid, all those kinds of things, and created the model, right? I mean, the standard thing that we're all very familiar with doing. That was in 1994. It's not that different today. It's still pretty much looking for your markers. Great broker friends, Brian Glazier and Lindsay Schluter down in Dallas. Brian always used to refer to it as markers. Find my marker stores. Which ones are the most like the one that we're looking at? This site is most like A, B, C, and D. And most of our modeling is based on that type of thing, right? Mm-hmm. There's been experiments with all kinds of other things, obviously variables like general manager and stuff like that. But when you look at the science behind it, it's just faster and cooler now. It's not any different. And so, what is the long range consistent factor going back into the beginning of time? It's one person being able to see the vision, the correct vision, I might add, not a hallucination, but the correct vision of what this could be. And I don't think that ever goes away. Sometimes, with all the new stuff coming in, all the cool things that we do, and which, by the way, I'm a huge fan. I'm a big map nerd. I love all the electronic stuff. I hated the old, back in the day, you're rubbing on arrows and all this stuff on your maps. I mean, I'm a big fan of everything we're doing nowadays. It's modern. But that doesn't take over the job. It just can't. And people are always going to be needing real estate experts like yourselves to help them make decisions. And, I think that the future for the young people coming up is every bit as bright as when we were rubbing labels on paper maps, if not brighter. Because I think that, frankly, decisions are getting harder, too, in some ways, because, how many more hamburger competitors can you have, right? Mm-hmm. or whatever. I mean, maybe you identified something with the Chinese sector there. Maybe we should think of a new fast food Chinese idea.
Just start day one and go head to head against Andrew. Yeah, good luck. Good luck.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Crazy.
So, if you could go back and hop in a time machine and we could talk to, late 80s, early 90s Russ, right? Early in your career. What piece of wisdom or two would you impart to young CRE professional Russ?
Well, I think one of the main things to keep in mind, I'll give a shout out to my boy Crosby on this one, because he said you should bring up football. He said, I wish I had when I was talking to Chris.
By the way, Crosby's going to owe you $5 and a Snickers here because you've mentioned his name. So I'm going on record that he owes you lunch next time he sees you.
It's kind of like, it started out with that Ohio State football hat on. You're going to lose to Michigan, unfortunately, for several years in a row if you're Ohio State. But you can't have that be the end of it. The idea that you're going to lose some in the real estate business, it's a given. I don't know a single person who has won them all. And there'll be deals that you let yourself fall in love with, which is another thing I should suggest, is don't fall in love with deals. But sometimes you just can't help it. And then they die. Something bad happens. It doesn't get approved, or somebody messes up the deal somehow, and maybe it's even somebody maliciously messes up your deal. Things can happen. Take it like Ohio State's lost to Michigan. You got to bounce back and look forward to the next thing, and continue to be what all real estate people are, which is a ridiculous optimist. It's going to be okay. You're going to figure it out. You're going to make it. Being a natural optimist is one of the prerequisites. And so that's something to keep in mind is, don't ever let it defeat you. Just use it as an opportunity to move on to the next win. And that's my football reference is, you're going to lose some, but, you keep going because the wins will come if you stick with it. That's probably one of the biggest things. And I had people give me that advice. My career evolved. I didn't stay in brokerage like some of my very successful friends did at that time. And some of them stayed in it all the way through their career and retired happy, never having done anything but, work at a brokerage, which is fantastic. For me, I had some other things come along. I had an opportunity to go work for this developer. I thought that was a great idea. I was developing in my mind the idea of being a developer. I wanted to be the next, Crow Brothers or whatever. And that evolved over time too. And it finally got to the point where I found myself being an expert in retail. And that's where I really found like that was my home. And I didn't get there in year one. That took some time. So, whatever it is you're doing, do it with optimism, keep plowing forward and keep your goals, but assume that you can be flexible and things usually work out.
You've always been one of the most optimistic guys I know. I love that trait about you.
It's sometimes people wonder, but it is true. I'm very optimistic.
You and I had the pleasure of dealing with a couple of franchisees that just always seemed to pick the 7th or 8th pad off the corner because they could buy it. And I just remember during that time, there were multiple times where I'd present a site, and you and I both knew it was the site. And, of course, our client, didn't like the site because they couldn't buy it or whatever, or just, what did fit their personal preference. And I remember always you were so optimistic, and I was just like, oh, we spent so much time already.
It's hard. That's especially for you because you had spent even more time than I had. But it's like, all right. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Tough. Good advice. What about tell us about something you did wrong? I think a lot of people don't like to normalize wrong, but tell us something you did wrong and what you learned from it.
I think that there's a few things, but this one actually is a little hard to admit. But and it was weird because it was at the bank, which was more or less a short 18-month learning session for me. I didn't ever consider myself to be going into that as a career, but one of the other loan officers had brought in a client that was working on a particular type of product. And, he and I had a conversation, and we kind of agreed that, we'd let him be the guy who was the product specialist in this particular product, and that, I would be the guy on other particular types of products, and kind of formed a loose association on that basis. And I was desperate for deals. Like I said, I didn't enjoy it very much. So needless to say, I wasn't very good at it. And yet I wanted to have success. And I came across a guy came to me that was in that other guy's product. And I worked him a little bit longer than was appropriate based upon the conversation I'd had with my buddy. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't out and out say that I was deceptive or tried to lie to him or trick him, but I was less than forthcoming. And here I am, almost 40 years later, regretting that. Always be honest, always be forthright. Sometimes honest and forthright means you just keep your mouth shut because that's what's needed. But don't ever let yourself think of my short-term success can supersede complete honesty with anyone. And that, like, for instance, by the keep your mouth shut part, I mean, if the paper is interviewing you and wants you to say salacious things about a developer or a city or something like that, don't fall for that trick. You're allowed to not speak sometimes, but I'm talking about relationships. And when my buddy called me out on it, it was a real lesson. And from that day forward, it's like I am never going to even come close to being deceptive. Never even approach the idea of not being forthright with the people I'm working with. And I tell you what, that's probably served me better than anything. Is sometimes I have to say things that I don't really want to share, but I know it's right to. And that's just been a real payoff. It always works out. It's always better. And I think that, that was it's kind of a hard pill to swallow at the time, but I sure made it work for me. I sure made it something that I learned from.
Yeah, what a great share. Thank you for that. Well, Russ, you've been a big part of my life for my entire life. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming on the Dirt Dog Pod, and thanks for sharing some great stories with us.
Thank you. And I think the Dirt Dog Pod's a really cool thing. Keep it going.
Absolutely.